My goal was to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I still got 2 days and I only got 500 to go. Share this video everywhere. The following video contains excessive usage of CAPOS. If you are triggered by Eddy and Christie in any way, I don't care. What is going on, guys? Up here, welcome back to Tekken Theory and Lore, the show where we choose characters from the Tekken roster, lay out their history, and attempt to solve any mysteries their stories leave behind. Watch until the very end of the video to be able to vote on which character you want to see in the next episode. This episode's about Capoeira master Eddy Gordo and his student, Christie Montero. What kind of man is Eddy Gordo? And why is his arm broken in Tekken 4? I'll bet a lot of you don't know anything about this character. He's always portrayed as this mysterious dude who doesn't always like to talk very much. We know he's always on the move and prefers to get things done alone. Even Christie, his own student, doesn't even know how to get in touch with him all the time, yet she goes to great lengths to find him. Even in Street Fighter Cross Tekken, she follows him all the way to Antarctica. From Brazil, wearing the same damn clothes and temperatures that are at least 112 degrees below 0 fucks given. And after she joins the roster, both Christie and Eddy have the same endings? I thought that was a load of BS, so I recently asked Harada and Michael Murray to stop doing that over on Twitter. Maybe we're not supposed to know about Eddy's personality other than the whole "I'm a very private man, now I have to go" attitude. But I feel like that's such a cop-out, and that's why I had to make this video. As my all-time favorite Tekken character, and the only character I care about seeing released in Tekken 7 at the time of this video, because he could be on there later, I will use my best abilities and look in way too close into the lore just to figure out what kind of man Eddy Gordo truly is.
Eddy! Espere por mim!
Our story starts with a 19-year-old Eddy Gordo who lives in good old Brazil, the land of party floats, people flipping around in the air, and Watermelon Woman. Eddy belongs to a family of a multi-million-dollar corporation, which is funny because most of the time this guy doesn't even wear shoes. Ah! 8 years before the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, Eddy goes home from a day at university. He opens the door to find his father lying on the floor, dying from a gunshot wound. No! In recent weeks, Eddy noticed that his father had been behaving strangely, as if to be constantly on edge. He had been working to put an end to a drug business that was pushing out more product, making people sick, and promoting violence within Brazil. Just as he had gained enough evidence to put those in charge away for good, an immediate hit was put out on his life. That's when his house was broken into, and he was shot in the chest. Eddy, my boy, now is not the time to fight. Falsely admit to the crime and hide in prison. Only there will you be safe. Eddy, with the love of his father, understood that it was important to do as he was told, because 19-year-old Eddy knew nothing about gangs, violence, and large corporations. These people he had never even heard of or seen before could one day show up and murder him in cold blood just to tie up loose ends. Slowly, he watched the light in his father's eyes become dim until their shine was simply no more. Briefly, Eddy mourned his father's lifeless body until he realized it was time for him to go. So rather than die, Eddy turns himself into the authorities and falsely admits to murder. He is sentenced to 8 years in prison. But let's pause for a second. We have a father dead on the floor from a gunshot wound because he has evidence against someone in Brazil who sells drugs. But Eddy's father is rich as hell and has a child, so we have to believe that he would have some sort of security measures in place to prevent this kind of thing, you know? Obviously, whatever measures were put in place didn't work, so we have to look for clues as to why they didn't. Now, we can assume that Eddy's father is not a bad dude because he's literally dedicated time to putting people in jail who are doing illegal and morally wrong things, telling us that he has a sense of code. This is also backed up by the fact that he also tells his son specifically to not get revenge for his death because he's more concerned with trying to keep his young boy safe. So from this little bit of detail, we can assume that Eddy's dad cares more about the safety of others rather than himself, and that he's probably not a man with a lot to hide. Meaning that his likely expensive house probably has high fences as well as an automated security system, but probably not guards. If so, the hitman would have to kill the guards to get to Eddy's dad, meaning Eddy would have been charged with more than just his dad's death and would serve longer than just a measly 8 years. Meaning that the assassin didn't have to deal with guards at all because they don't exist, making this house a little easier to break into. But still, the hitman would have to infiltrate his place, which does have some level of protection, and shoot Eddy's dad with ease without leaving any significant evidence that would lead to deeper investigation that would have proved Eddy was innocent. Now I know what you're thinking, maybe Nina got the contract and killed Eddy's dad, but it couldn't have been her because she was in cryo sleep for 19 years. Couldn't have been her. From all of that, we know that this was a professional contract hit meant not to leave any evidence of the shooter or the party that hired the assassin behind. Someone paid good money for this rich man to die, and if that kind of money is worth killing an innocent loving man over drugs, those drugs must be extremely important and the parties responsible must be extremely powerful people. But more about that later. So what a turn of events. Eddy is given the choice between dying, going to jail, or to change his identity to Tiger Jackson and live the rest of his days as a 1970s style disco man. Okay, that last part's not true. Basically, this was Eddy's original design for Tekken 3. What I feel likely happened is it was changed because they felt it wouldn't be right if the only black guy in the game was portrayed as a stereotype complete with a giant afro. So instead, they made Tiger Jackson his own character, acting as a secret palette swap for Eddy. And I have to say, that was a smart play. Well done, Namco. This Brazilian backstory is much more interesting than a random black people story you could have made up about gang violence, drugs, and people getting shot. Prison was hell for Eddy, being that he went straight from a life of luxury to a life of confinement, having to look over his shoulder every day and sleeping in a bed next to a toilet. Even throughout all the stress, there was not a day that went by that Eddy didn't swear to get his revenge. One day of Eddy's life behind bars, things got a little rowdy and a prison riot started, causing inmates to escape through one of the prison walls. Eddy did his best to stay away from the surrounding chaos because his father wanted him to be safe, but he was cornered by prison guards. It was only when an old man showing the unique ability to defend himself using strange and complicated movements and stopping the guards from hurting him did he truly become safe. Neither of them gets in trouble for this considering the nature of what's happening around them. Later on, the prison is brought back to order. Eddy asked the old man how he was able to move like he did. The old man informs him that his movements are a martial art known as capoeira, a style of fighting that Africans invented when they were enslaved by the Portuguese, that they disguised as dancing during the 16th century for purposes of mastering self-defense secretly should their surroundings ever become too chaotic to live in. And if any of them ever escaped, they could use capoeira to defend themselves and put up an actual fight. Some slaves who escaped to the jungles mastered their craft and passed it down through generations of Afro-Brazilian and multiracial practitioners known as capoeiristas. They taught it to him after it was legalized in 1940. Previously, it had been outlawed because it was misunderstood as street fighting, so after the law passed, anyone could learn it. Capoeira strengthens both the mind and the body and uses deception as a means of offense as well as defense, hence its elegant and unpredictable nature. I believe Eddy saw a piece of his father in this old man. As such, he asked the old man if he could teach him his ways. He was in luck. The old man was known as the legendary capoeira master before his life in jail and is also a teacher. The old man accepts, and for the next 8 years, the legendary capoeira master teaches Eddy everything he knows about the art of capoeira. During that time, the old man told him about family he has on the outside, a beautiful young granddaughter named Christie. In return for his training, legendary capoeira master asked Eddy to seek out Christie and become her capoeira teacher when he gets out of prison. Eddy nods his head and accepts. In Tekken 3, Eddy is finally released from prison. He immediately wants to get revenge for his father's death. So when he hears about the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3 and that the winner gains control of the Mishima Zaibatsu, he figures that with the wealth and power they control, he could use their resources to find his father's killer when he wins the tournament. So he enters, but it was all for naught. Within a few rounds into the tournament, he loses, and that's it. He gets no sense of self-satisfaction and no revenge. But there is another matter for Eddy to attend to now. the legendary Capoeira master's granddaughter. He goes back to Brazil, finding Christie Monteiro exactly where he was told he would find her because Eddy is a man that is bound by his word. He then trains Christie under his wing, teaching her everything he knows. What took 8 years for Eddy to master, Christie was able to master in only 2. It was a combined effort of Eddy learning from the best in the world and Christie being a sponge for learning. In Tekken 4, Eddy mysteriously disappears, but he leaves a note behind for Christie.
Those responsible for my father's death must pay.
And with her grandfather in prison and her mentor missing, she searches for Eddy using her only clue, the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. What clue? Did Eddy leave behind his issue of Iron Fist Illustrated or something? Page 25, it's got a picture of Heihachi wearing a diaper. This leads Christie to enter the tournament, starting her on a never-ending cycle of clingy behavior in every universe. She begins her search by fighting through all her tournament opponents. At this same point in time, it is my theory that Eddy Gordo never actually left Brazil, because he's in fact managed to track down the organization whom the hitman that killed his father was hired for. Eddy's ending in Tekken 3 shows us exactly what happened. Now, if you watch the Do Tekken and Street Fighter Share the Same Universe video, you know that Tekken endings are not always canon, but take place in another universe, or rather they show you what would happen if certain conditions are met. If you haven't seen that video and you want to check it out, here's an annotation for you to click on the screen right now. In a nutshell, whether these scenes happen exactly as shown is irrelevant, because what's important is that the endings show the characters' intentions if they are ever put into that situation. Then the question simply becomes, are they ever put into that situation? I believe that the answer here is yes. Eddy never goes to the 4th tournament. That's why he's only available as a secret palette swap for Christie in Tekken 4. But Eddy then reappears canonically in Tekken 5. This is how we know that even though his Tekken 3 ending does not happen, at least not actually during Tekken 3, something similar happens in Tekken 4 off screen. And it's very unlikely that in the 2-year span that he was teaching Christie that this outcome would have been any different. He may not have been wearing the same clothes. He may not have beaten up the same guards. He may not have actually beaten up any guards. Hell, in Eddy's neck of the woods, people are walking into Brazilian mansions like they're fucking Walmart. But he damn sure broke into this exact drug dealer's house and manhandled him until he confessed that the one who ordered the hit on his father was none other than Kazuya Mishima. Now, I did a little more research and I came to a reasonable conclusion to why all of this was necessary. Back in Tekken 2, Kazuya Mishima was in control of the Mishima Zaibatsu and he was at his most evil. He extorted money from businesses all over the world, including illegal ones such as the crack cocaine kingpins in Brazil. You see, crack cocaine is the most prevalent drug problem Brazil has had since the 1990s. People are so addicted to this drug in Brazil that there are entire communities where people are dedicated to doing nothing but smoking crack. And of course, there's the illegal buying and selling of it. The problem has gotten so bad over the years that an entire city in Brazil where it happens the most, São Paulo, is known for its bad side of town, Cracolândia. In English, Crackland, as in the land of crack. From what I gather, Tekken is suggesting that this is the guy behind all of those real-world problems. Kazuya was taking a good chunk of this guy's profits, probably even as much as half. Otherwise, Kazuya threatened to kill him or even shut down his entire operation. Obviously, the Kingpin went along with the idea because he knows that even a big-time drug operation like his is not nearly as powerful as the Mishima Zaibatsu, meaning he was going to be losing out on a lot of money. So what does he do? Well, with him losing money, likely half of his profits, he was going to have to import and disperse twice as much crack cocaine. And this is what I believe got the attention of Eddy's father, another Brazilian man with millions of dollars who conducted his own investigation when he saw so many people on the streets wasting their lives away for a damn rock. He slowly began to watch his country descend into madness. People were living on the streets, pregnant women were getting high, giving birth to sick children, families were breaking apart, and people were even going as far as killing each other, all in the name of crack. This man decided that he had had enough. What I feel likely happened is someone on the inside of the operation talked as they felt they weren't getting paid enough to be loyal and to keep the secrets. I also feel like Eddy's father was an intimidating man, given the sense of power that just comes with being wealthy and a father. And I feel like he also manhandled people the same way Eddy does in his Tekken 3 ending just to be able to get some of this information. Where do you think Eddy learned it? Now you can't be manhandling people in a drug lord's territory without him catching wind of what's been going on. The drug lord found out that Eddie's father had been sticking his nose where it shouldn't have been, and he was intimidated that he would lose everything he had worked to build in the drug world. So he goes to Kazuya and he says,
Hey man, they got this rich man on my back and his name is Gordo. I don't have the money and the resources to kill a man that rich and important, and if he exposes our business relationship is done. You need to kill that motherfucker.
Without hesitation, Kazuya hires an assassin for an undisclosed amount that likely included a lot of zeros. The assassin went to Eddie's house, got past the security system, and killed Eddie's father without leaving a trace of evidence, leaving Eddie fatherless and branded a criminal for the next 8 years. Back at the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4, in a twist of fate, Christie very likely crossed paths with Kazuya and lost the tournament to him as he is her sub-boss. Christie's ending is not canon because it depends heavily on her winning the tournament by beating the final boss Heihachi, which I just told you she didn't do. If the condition is met in another universe that Christie wins all of her matches and the tournament, she is presented with a giant Heihachi head trophy, but she doesn't give a shit. She's dissatisfied because she's 10,000 miles away from home, she beat a bunch of people and won the tournament, but she still hasn't found Eddie. But moments later, she spots the only character model in the crowd that doesn't look completely generic. It's Eddie. He resurfaces and he has his arm through a sling. This is never explained because, again, this ending takes place in another universe where Christie does win the tournament, so it didn't happen on the official timeline, but it does show the character's intentions. I'm gonna cut right to the chase on this one, or rather I'm gonna cut straight to the theory. Eddie managed to kill Kazuya on this timeline. He avenged his father, guys. This damage could only have been the result of a very difficult fight. 1, Kazuya ain't no bitch. 2, Eddie's been waiting a decade to kill Kazuya. 3, Kazuya went down on this timeline, but he managed to counter one of Eddie's back 1-4s and break the exact arm that starts at the beginning of that string. And 4, Christie already beat Kazuya on this timeline. That's how she won the tournament. You as a player get to beat Kazuya on the timeline where she wins the tournament. And just like in this ending cutscene, I believe Eddie was nearby, and he was waiting for his chance to strike. This tells us that this is a very ambitious timeline where everything goes the way of both Eddie and Christie. Their endings may be the same, but they had entirely different experiences leading up to this point in this universe. In Tekken 5, the legendary Capoeira master is released from prison. Eddy and Christie both go to greet him, only to find a frail old man whose former healthier self appears to be almost entirely gone. As such, Eddy brings his master to a doctor. The doctor tells Eddy that his master has an incurable disease and that he only has 6 months to live. Filled with absolute rage and memories of his father, Eddy decides to enter the King of Iron Fist Tournament 5 alongside his student Christie Montero with the intention of one of them gaining control of the Mishima Zaibatsu for their technology and resources, since they've been known to create dinosaurs, boxing kangaroos, and whatever abomination was lingering inside this tube that looked like a giant testicle. They figure the Zaibatsu must have something they can use to heal their master. It is heavily implied that Eddy and Christie eventually came to a point in the tournament where they had to fight each other. I believe that at least one of these interludes actually happened because, like the Tekken endings, they show what these characters would do if they are ever put into this situation. This is what happens in the universe where Christie beats Eddy.
Christie, it's too dangerous. I want you to go home.
No! How do you expect me not to do anything after I've seen what happened to my grandpa?
Then I don't have a choice.
Final round. Fight!
We see from this that Eddy wants Christie to drop out of the tournament because it's becoming too dangerous. The guy hosting the tournament literally has a face where his stomach should be, is possessed by the devil, and is on fire. Sometimes anyway. So Christie better get to stepping cause she ain't gonna beat nothing like that. But too bad for Eddy because Christie beats his ass. Too bad for Christie because I don't think she's that good just yet.
Wait for me, Eddy. I promise I'll come back.
Now let's play it from Eddy's perspective.
Eddy, leave this to me.
No, let me handle this. I need you to stay out of this.
Eddy, why won't you understand?
Final round. Fight!
If you listen to the wording in this clip, we can get the impression that this conversation has already been going on for a while. Eddy, leave this to me. Eddy, why won't you understand? 2 lines of dialogue which tell us she's frustrated. frustrated enough to challenge Eddy. After all, how can you expect her to leave after what happened to her grandfather? In both instances, Eddy's trying to take full responsibility for the fate of his master. He also shows that he'll do anything in order to do this.
Wait for me, Christie. I will come back.
I believe this to be the actual exchange between these characters because Eddy's taken full responsibility for something he totally didn't have to, so this is where Christie loses the tournament. Later on, in another universe, it doesn't actually happen, Eddy finds Kazuya Mishima, and he kills him, this time without breaking his fucking arm. Unfortunately for Eddy, in the world of reality, he lost to some other fighter and never made it to Kazuya. But the information that we can pull off of these other universes is if Eddy is given the opportunity, he will straight up murder Kazuya in battle. Since both Eddy and Christie failed, legendary capoeira master would have to wait a little longer to get his cure so that he could practice capoeira once again. Jin Kazama ends up winning the tournament by defeating his undead grandfather Jinpachi Mishima, sending him to the abyss, and gaining supreme control over the Mishima Zaibatsu. Secretly after the tournament, Eddy has a conversation with Jin Kazama and asks him to help his master. Jin tells Eddy that if he joins the Tekken force, he promises to find a cure as one has not been currently developed. I'm gonna take a wild guess here and say that Eddy's master is probably dealing with cancer. Jin is promising to find a cure for cancer, and Eddy goes along with this because he feels he has no other choice. So he swiftly takes legendary capoeira master from his home and into the care of the Mishima Research and Medical Facilities. Eddy begins work immediately. In Tekken 6, Christie returns home to find that both Eddy and her grandfather are missing. She learns from the hospital where her grandfather was staying that he was transferred to a Mishima Zaibatsu medical facility. So in order to find the precise location of her grandfather as well as Eddy, she enters the King of Iron Fist Tournament 6 to get answers. Meanwhile, Eddy has been working closely with Jin. Both Nina and Eddy work as high-ranking officers that direct units to wage war over the entire world. Eddy just gets a more hands-on experience, whereas Nina takes care of Jin wherever he goes, but has the same amount of command that her sister Anna has over at G-Corp. From here, Christie just does not win the tournament. Why are they always fucking losing? It's the end of the tournament. Christie stands alone in a cemetery over her grandfather's grave and weeps.
Grandpa.
Eddy shows up fashionably late and gets bitch-slapped in the process. All that fighting and running around for the sake of a terrorist. For once in his life, Eddy was not able to keep his word. Eddy decides that it was all for nothing, and symbolically breaks his allegiance with the Tekken Force. Legendary capoeira master lies in a grave beneath their feet. A very sad end to a very sad story. But how do we know this scene actually happens? Let's rewind for a bit, because we don't. Next time on Tekken Theory and Lore! Hey you, did you enjoy this episode of Tekken Theory and Lore? I'll bet you did. Did you know that just one episode takes over 100 hours to finish? I'll bet you didn't. Would you then like to see more episodes on a regular basis? Of course you would. Well, now you, my superfans, can support the channel through Patreon Theory and Lore. With Patreon, you can support the channel with as little as $1 each month, and even get your hands on some rewards like behind-the-scene updates, uncensored outtakes from the show, and even early access to each episode days in advance. This is an opportunity for you, my superfans, who have always wanted to support my channel, to finally have an avenue to do so. Click the annotation on the screen to be taken to the official Patreon video where you can learn so much more. A link is also in the description. And if you're still sticking around to vote on the next character who gets a video made as a token of my appreciation for sticking around until the end, the link is at the very bottom of the description of this video. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, and remember that you cannot kill an idea. See you guys next time! Ow!